Dobar dan, hello everybody. It's nice to be in Ljubljana, and congratulations to the university on your 100th anniversary. I wish you another many hundreds of years success in the future. As Matjaž says, at the Centre for Publishing in Oxford, we teach publishing at both undergraduate and postgraduate level, and we write books and articles about publishing. And Oxford's quite a publishing centre. There are lots of global publishing companies in Oxford, and we're very close to London as well. In terms of personal connection with the university presses, I used to work at Oxford University Press as a trade editor, and I'm also an author with them as well. I worked out that about 150 of our former students now work at OUP in Oxford, so we've got a good track record of employment at university presses as well. My connection with Princeton University Press is that I'm on the the European Advisory Board for Princeton University Press, which has an office just north of Oxford for its European operations. So I know a bit about university presses. I'm going to talk today about the broader context of university presses within academic publishing, which I hope complements what people have said so far. I'm going to talk a bit in broad terms about what's happening in academic publishing and the place of university presses, what should be their mission, and what's happening with the future of university presses. I think there's quite an exciting time at the moment. There are a lot of new presses starting in the UK, and open access is obviously bringing fresh opportunities in this sector of publishing. So what is academic publishing? Well, we can divide it into three broad categories. Firstly, journals, then books, research monographs, and also textbooks as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these categories. Journals publishing, if you look at where the two big university presses in the UK, CUP and AUP, fit in terms of the number of journals published, they are quite small by comparison. I think they're sort of 13th and 14th in the list. I've missed out some of the publishers in the middle on this diagram. So you've got companies like Springer Nature, Elsevier, the big heavyweight Wiley, big heavyweights in this area of publishing journals, and certainly this area of publishing favours scale. You have high fixed costs if you're going to have a really good platform that can be accessed all around the world. There are high costs around that. I think Elsevier spent £6 million developing Science Direct originally, and must have spent many, many more millions in the meantime. And they've added in book content as well to the journal content there as well. So there are high fixed costs around journal publishing, but once you've surpassed those high fixed costs, it then becomes quite profitable. Hence, if you look at the company results of some of those big publishers, hence some of the debate about open access that we don't need to go into now. Obviously, the expenditure on journals tends to dominate library budgets and tends to squeeze out the budgets for books, and that's certainly a common trend in the UK. The figures for UK journals publishers, they're still getting about 3/4 of their income from subscriptions, and only just up to about 10% from open access charges at the moment, and those figures from 2017. As we all know, the journal has gone digital, and printing has shifted to users. So I'm really interested in journal article. I tend to print it out and read it on the train. So the printing has shifted in that direction, and there are very few print-only journals now. We all know about the growth of open access, and about 30% of articles are now OA. There are lots of different models around journals publishing, constant experimentation, and we heard from UCL about the mega journal concept. So Public Library of Science was one of the first in that area to have a really big journal and to largely assess articles by the methodology and allow more open peer review once an article is published. We've also got the cascade concept. So if you've got a top-ranked journal like Nature, where you're turning away most of your submissions, can you reuse the peer review in some way? So with the cascade concept, you have a kind of tier of journals, so you might be able to reuse the peer review for a lower ranked journal within the same stable, and that's produced economies around the peer review system. Quite an interesting development as well. You've got sponsorship model where universities might get together to start up a new journal, and obviously the only game in town now is OA. If you're going to start a new journal, it's going to be open access. it's a kind of now new arms race worldwide with America and China, with massive research budgets, and China's now overtaken, in the latest figures I've seen in terms of the output of research papers, just overtaken the States. In terms of citations, the States is still way ahead, but obviously China has got an ambition to catch up with those on that metric as well. There are about 33,000 peer-reviewed journals, again the latest figures from STM that I've seen in the English language, and about 2.5 million new articles each year. The number of articles tends to go up with the number of researchers as that grows, and the kind of arrival of China as a major research player has got huge implications for the journals market over the next few years. What China does about open access. Their ambition, say 5 or 6 years ago, was to get their researchers publishing in international top-ranked journals. They then decided, the government I should say, decided that the strategy should be more to try and develop their own major international journals from China, and there's a major impetus behind that at the moment. So watch this space. I think more developments coming soon. In terms of book publishing, as I've said just now, library budgets tend to get squeezed by expenditure on journals. Publishers over the last few years have found it hard to make up in digital terms the revenue they have lost as print sales have gone down. But I was in OUP last week and they said that's starting to balance out a bit more now. So digital sales are definitely increasing as print continues to fall in terms of importance. There's been big concern in the market about the level of ebook prices. I'm sure you're aware of that. Publishers have seen the shift towards digital, and they've put some really quite high ebook prices into the market, which have been unpopular. And so that's a kind of constant dynamic. We heard also from other people about how OA is coming to books now. Our research council, our research exercise has not yet mandated that, but it may do for the research exercise the one after next. So that's going to be a big change. We know from journals that there is money in STM for gold model of open access, but there's less money in the humanities for that kind of model. So green is more common model in the humanities, perhaps with some kind of embargo. But if the embargo disappears, as it is likely to, then that model survive? We'll have to see. For publishers, it may really impact publishers quite badly. So we'll see what happens in that area as well. And obviously the half-life of humanities journal article or book is really quite long. Monographs in the UK, well, we said the monograph was dead. The print runs were going down and down and down, and nobody was reading them. A few copies going into libraries, and as Jamie said, they're selling about 200 copies. In print, that's the norm really for a monograph sale now. So the monograph's disappearing, but no, the research was that as the print runs were falling, the number of titles increased. So over a period 2004 to 2013, monograph production from those 4 top academic publishers actually doubled in that time. So they were making up with title reduction, which is an old publishing trick, is to publish more books when they're not selling quite so well. And what has supported that? Well, reduction in costs and the use of print-on-demand, digital printing. There is a large academic publisher now that does not hold stock of any of their book titles. They just print purely to order now. So that will be the future of this kind of book publishing. And there've been reduction in costs around editorial and not having to invest in stock in the same way has reduced cost as well. But the model is also to take those books into online platforms. So if you take a publisher like OUP, all their monographs will be published into their Oxford Scholarship Online platform. And what's interesting about this is that it's a group model as well. They'll take in titles from other university presses. So for example, Liverpool University Press, Princeton University Press, they build in to the model that they're accepting titles from other publishers through an agreement. So actually those titles are getting good visibility through that kind of service like Oxford Scholarship Online, which obviously is a subscription service in the same way that journal articles through subscription services. Textbooks. As Zoran mentioned, I'm author of Inside Book Publishing, which is a textbook, and it was kind of accidental textbook. It wasn't originally designed as one, but it's become one, and so a lot of smaller presses have these accidental textbooks that work well in the textbook market. But globally, for example, if you look at the US, there are a few big players there. We've got Cengage is just about to merge with McGraw-Hill, which will increase the consolidation in the textbook market. Concerns about the high prices that students have to pay for textbooks, and so the publishers are now trying to come up with new models. Rental has really affected them in the States, and the increasing use of a rental model. Jamie mentioned second-hand as well. That affects sales in the textbook market. If I ask my students, they still prefer print, but for our university library, it may be more efficient to have access to the ebook version from the economic side of things. So a lot of consolidation in this market, and there are kind of inclusive access models now where you might, if you're paying for your education, you might get the textbooks included in the price of your university fees. For example, in America, that's a growing model. Cengage have just thrown a curveball into the textbook market with a kind of one-off price, which will get you access to all the textbooks you need. Cengage Unlimited. So all-you-can-eat access is how it's described. And so that could really affect the textbook market as well. Will the competitors have to follow such a new model? Other markets for university presses? Well, Princeton, which I know well, they do quite a lot in the sort of academic trade space, so they've got a really good economics list which has some trade sale. They've got a natural history list which is probably mostly trade from that point of view. So some of the university presses, especially in America, operate in that space around academic trade. My new book, Oxford Handbook of Publishing, sort of reference market. You've got the mission of some of the universities' presses is more broadly around education. So, for example, they might be publishing for the schools market, which could be quite lucrative. For Oxford University Press, their most lucrative ever publishing over a long period of time was for the English language teaching market, where they had courses selling millions of copies, and that generated huge sales over a number of years. And of course, if you can develop a global presence with branches in other countries, distribution networks in other countries, and start to tap into other markets, that sometimes leads to local publishing. So, for example, in India, Oxford University Press have their own branch with a local academic publishing program. So the quite interesting developments happen around those sorts of things. So this is sort of back of the envelope calculation, but I reckon AUP and CUP have got over 90% of the sales for university presses in the UK. AUP, the latest figures I saw, they're approaching, at over £800 million in total. CUP is that bit smaller. If you then there's a huge gap before you start to encounter other presses like Edinburgh University Press, EUP, their sales are about £3 million. Similar, I think, for Liverpool University Press. The smaller presses are probably not making a contribution to the university in the way that the larger ones, those two larger ones, are if they're in surplus. And they're aiming for sustainability, and I know Edinburgh has the opportunity to reinvest any surplus it makes into its publishing programme, because it's good for the brand of the university to have the university press doing that. Obviously, brand is huge in this market, and we've gone the same thing again. Okay. Obviously, for your career, to be published by one of the top university presses is really good, and there's a connection with the brand of the university as well, and UCL's obviously got a really good brand in this market, which is why their press is doing well. Smaller presses may specialise around subjects that are important or have got a reputation at their own university, and that can really have a good interaction between the subject of the university and the publishing programme. But it's not going to do your career any harm to have a monograph published by Oxford or Cambridge University Press, and that is still a truth in the academic market. The mission, when I started at AUP, it had nothing to do with the university, and the university didn't want to know it. And then when it started making money, suddenly it became a university department, and there's quite a close relationship there now between the press and the university. The AUP mission, it's to support the university's objective of excellence in research, scholarship and education. So that broad dimension of education allows it to publish in the schools market, children's publishing, and a variety of trade lists as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about Liverpool University Press, and so I thought I'd put their mission up there, which mentions culture as well as part of the mission, which I think is quite interesting to have that in the mission. Now, I don't know if you're going to have a mission statement for your university press, but I'd be interested to see it when you've written it, because it's quite interesting to compare the mission statements. And I think that mention of culture is quite interesting from the perspective of Liverpool. So I know a little bit about Liverpool University Press. I was friends with the former chair of it, and so I followed it was in a bad way at one point, we have the research exercise every 7 years in the UK, and it tended to clog up with titles from the university as academics wanted to get a book published quickly. They've only just finished it and the exercise is coming up and they need to have it published quickly. So it tended to get clogged up in that kind of cycle. So very much supply-led publishing that Zoran was talking about was a problem for the press. They had high levels of stock with no proper financial management, and it was very much the university academics driving what they wanted to get books through the press, and there wasn't the kind of editorial judgment that you need if you're going to have a proper editorially led university press. And so they had a new strategy. They sorted out the governance, established some degree of editorial independence from the university, which enabled them to make choices about what they published, rather than just being given a book and told you've got to get it out within a certain period. They actually went back to their mission to think about what their selling points were, and they decided to work around the city of Liverpool, its culture, its history and things like that, to have a strong element of that within the university press. They decided to avoid STM as being too expensive to get involved in that area, so concentrated more in the humanities area, and they avoided professional publishing as well, where there's a lot of competition. So they had quite a selective approach to what they were going to publish. It wasn't just everything. And they decided they were going to become a cultural flagship for the city and the university, which was reflected in the journals they published, some of the titles they published, those kind of things. So I think that cultural aspect's been really important. And Liverpool's really had a big renaissance as a press and is one of the successful university presses in the UK now. It sorted out its structure, what distribution mechanisms it used, established new relationships. As we saw, some of its books were going to AUP's online platform, so they weren't afraid of working with other university presses as part of their strategy. They start an expansion program, choosing what kind of books and journals they wanted to publish. They actually acquired some journal titles as well. And we were hearing about your open access textbook project. I think they were part of that as well. So they actually tried to make a name for themselves for innovation in the OA space, which I think is important in today's university press market as well. So I think the climate has changed for university presses. There are quite a few have opened and are opening in the UK. Certainly a university is looking at, do I have a cost-effective route for open access publication for my own academics and researchers? So that's a driving force. We know that OA can broaden the audience for research in terms of downloads, views and those kind of things. So it's good for the visibility of the university to have a press doing that kind of program. It's also good for early career researchers who may find it harder to publish in with some of the more established university presses, and so to have a route for them to publish can be really important. And I mean, I was asked for advice on the startup of a university press in this area, but I'm not going to tell you which university, and they were very keen to start with a printer, and I was saying, why do you want to start with a printer? Because the future is digital, and you don't need to have your own printer to be a university press. I mean, that's how originally university presses started, but that's quite an old-fashioned model. Probably the future of monographs is purely digital, which gives everyone an opportunity to publish in that space. If you get the editorial quality right, the peer review process right, make a name for yourselves with quality publishing. Open access textbooks, the jury's still out on quite what's going to happen with that area, but that's quite interesting space for innovation as well. And so we've got new presses starting, and I think you see those figures about the consolidation of textbook publishing, academic publishing, and universities are thinking, well, we want to provide other routes for publication to make it easier more generally. Often presses start with the library. Certainly in America that's the case, and obviously repositories are really important now. We've got one at our university. And digital publication revolutionizes the whole of publishing now. You don't have to hold stock in the way that you would have had to before. You can just print to order. Open access, lots of opportunities for university presses to get involved, and many of them have low overheads. They're probably staffed by 1 or 2 people, these new university presses, so you don't need to have a large infrastructure necessary to start up. So I just want to finish by saying lots of opportunities in publishing more generally, but also for university presses. The digital print model, if you get that right, you can get your finances to work well. You can distribute globally now. There are distribution mechanisms where you can get a print book printed for you locally somewhere else in the world through someone like Ingram. And if you collaborate with other people, you can develop innovations. And audio is something Princeton's getting interested in. Have you thought about the audio market in academic publishing? I haven't seen anyone do it. There's a lot of podcasting around now, but that could be a really interesting space for university presses, I think, to get involved through podcasting. AI, if you've got researchers working in the area of AI, huge contribution they can make in the area of publishing as well. In terms of machine intelligence, looking at what is published and what kind of, looking at the output of research and coming to conclusions through that. And again, if you've got researchers in that area, that could provide some interesting ways forward. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Angus. Questions?
Are you dealing with audiobooks? The new trend is the people wish to hear the book, not read anymore.
Sorry?
Do you deal with audiobooks? Are you publishing them?
We're not a publisher ourselves directly. Sorry. Yeah, we're not a publisher ourselves directly, but audio is a hugely growing market in the UK in more general publishing. But I think there's lots of opportunities. For example, I'm doing a podcast in China at the moment about publishing. I think there are lots of opportunities for academics to get involved in this market, and it can lead to really quite interesting publishing projects because you can do books out of those podcasts and things like that. So I think that's quite an interesting space for university presses to be getting into. And if you want to highlight your key researchers, then a podcast series might be quite a good way of doing that. That was really my thinking, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Any more? Yeah.
Okay. This might be a bit of an elaboration on the audiobooks. I myself listen to a lot of audiobooks, but only in literature, not in academics, because it is very hard to just listen to something that is more mentally problematic, shall we say. What about, is there any project more in the sense of going one step ahead and doing, I don't know, in such a way as this, so a payable just video book-ish, something?
Yeah, I mean, publishers have experimented with that, and especially in the area of textbooks, they've. But none of it has quite taken off in the way they thought it would maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, there were some quite interesting examples of kind of interactive textbooks with audio and video in there. And then there was some retreat towards kind of more interactive PDFs with embedded audio and video rather than the kind of all singing or dancing things that you can create. But I think for a major textbook, you've got to have online resources, and that should probably include some videos these days as well. So, but it tends to be more marketing material. No one's actually reinvented the book as the kind of what you're describing. Maybe there's an opportunity there as well, but it hasn't quite happened yet.
I think it's mostly because people, when they think of video, just think documentaries more than actually books.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Last year, one of my students arrived asking me why don't we produce audio textbooks.
Yep.
And my answer was very traditional. Look, you need good equipment, you need a good voice, preferably some actor to read it for you, and well, it's very expensive, you know, to produce textbooks. And you know, we are a small university, not many people would buy this audio textbook. And then she made the research. You know, she used this Google Forms, you know, and it appears she has some 200 or 300 interviews. It appeared that students would like their professors to read them good night stories from their textbooks, you know. So they would be willing to listen, really, a sort of good morning or good night stories. So. And I was really like a little bit surprised, you know. So perhaps there is a market for audio textbooks. So just a small experience.
So here's Aruna's.
Can I add some comment to audiobooks? Recently we published first our audiobook. It is textbook on rhetoric. So it was quite cheap because we have a radio in Vilnius University, where radio have all the equipment for recording sound, and the author voiced over all the text of this textbook. So it costs nothing for us, and we are trying now to earn some money on this growing market.
No, well, I think that's good, but I think it's also got the potential for impact. If you want to be looking at the impact of the research from the university, then having an audio series that maybe is listened to by a more general market could be good. Sorry? Yes. Yeah.
As an old-fashioned traditionalist, I would prefer students to know how to read too. So, but never mind. There is one question up there.
Hi, I'm the Secretary General of the Faculty of Law, and it's a coincidence that I'm also in a startup, Audiobooks.se. You can all look at it. And we actually did textbooks at the law faculty. And one of our professors, Professor Kranz, he made 28 hours of Roman law. So we have 3 publications. One was read by, Faculty of Arts student. One was done by him, all the text in the book, and one was done by him with additional explanations. So it's already 2 years now. We're selling the books. They're like renting for €4 for 8 days. And we just, 2 days ago, we signed a contract with Association of Deaf and Blind, and they have a library of 5,000 audiobooks, and we will all put them on our system. So it already has been done, and it's a big market, a growing market. So
good for you. Yeah.
As a comment, beware of copyrights, because the Association of Deaf and Blind has,
a special exception. And with all the other books, we did sign a special contract, and usually the authors didn't give the OD reproduction rights to the general publisher, so it's there with the authors.